It is a busy Sunday here on Politics Unplugged. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, police work is tough. Is there a more humane way of policing? We'll talk about that, plus oil and gas safety, and hear from Republican candidate for governor Victor Mitchell. I'm Ann Trujillo, and welcome to Politics Unplugged. It has become a sad reality in this modern world. Interactions between police and the public that once would have been routine, taking a bad turn. And it's a crisis no one wants, yet keeps happening. And it's a topic Darren Spencer talks about in his book, Humane Policing. And Darren Spencer is joining us now to talk about what's in his book and what you communicate with other police forces out there. First, what is humane policing? What does that mean?
Humane policing is an individual approach to law enforcement where when you're dealing with the person, you deal with them as a person versus an entity or a statistic or a previous offender. And so you take an approach that allows dignity and gives them a chance to make options and make good choices for both themselves and their family to move forward from a bad situation.
Because it seems like a simple question, but why isn't that being done now?
Well, it is a difficult situation. And right now, some agencies are going to a community-style policing, which is good. But everybody's kind of on edge, both the community and law enforcement as a whole, between the different interactions that they're having.
I think that the big issue that came up this week, or most recently, is the shooting of Philando Castile and that video that came out. In fact, let's show folks right now so we can watch it for a moment. I know it's disturbing, but take a look.
Firearm on me. Don't reach for it then. Don't pull it out. Don't pull it out.
So what happened here? How did this go so terribly wrong?
I think it happens when people are uncomfortable and on edge. And so then a situation can go from bad to tragic very quickly. And so maybe the cop was uncomfortable, or I can't say exactly what happened inside the car, but if the cop is more comfortable with who he's interacting with, there's going to be more leniency and more push and give between what transpires.
But I mean, you yourself said there's a big divide here. How do you bridge that? I mean, we're talking miles apart here.
We are, and both from the community side, we need to start appreciating law enforcement more for the sacrifices they make, and on the law enforcement side, we need to take more time to handle a situation in a manner that will be more conducive to a better outcome.
Okay, so what is that? I mean, how do you do that? You know, is there something that our law enforcement can do tomorrow that would make a difference?
And what I would do, and I talk about in my book, Humane Policing, is I would talk to the individual and I would find some common ground that I could have with that person in front of me. And that way that person could start relating to me as a person doing a job rather than a person in a uniform. And it would be anywhere from relating to a topic of clothing or sports teams, anything that we could get common ground interaction on that's not on the enforcement side of the law.
And then on the flip side, how is it that the public can learn from these situations so that there is a more trusting relationship?
Well, I equate it back to when I was in the military back in the mid-90s, and I was articulate and educated, and when people would talk to me then, they would be confused at why I would be in the military. And there was that disconnect of understanding of what I did and why I did it. But if you fast forward to today, everybody, they may not politically agree with our military or what the military is doing, but they would appreciate that individual service member for their actions. And so I think there's a lot of misunderstanding in what cops do and how they do it. Like if you would ask somebody what an accountant does, you know, it's pretty clear. But you ask law-abiding citizens, you know, they would tell you, well, they enforce laws and they keep us safe. But that's a very broad brush. They don't understand the policy aspects, the aspects of officer safety, and why we have to take a definitive approach to some things and other things not so much. In law enforcement, there is a lot of discretion, but people don't understand that discretion.
What is it, do you think, that has happened that has gotten us to this point where there is definitely that mistrust, and I think on both sides?
I think one of the big problems right now is the media, and they like to throw labels on situations, and that tends to inflame and enrage a situation. And when they do that, it actually takes away from the situations that may be racially biased. When we're saying every situation is racially biased, it tends to enrage the community toward law enforcement. So then when law enforcement is responding to help, then it's a combative, abrasive relationship.
But you also see that those are news events that have to be covered.
Sure. I understand that they're news-breaking events, but why do we have to put racial bias in there? Why do we have to label? I can tell you a story.
Well, there are statistics behind those.
Sure. There are. So a story in my book, I was serving a protection order with a kick-out, which means I needed to go there and have this individual leave the residence with his belongings. And it was like 8 in the morning. And I knew that he had a criminal history, a violent history, and gang-related flags in the computer that I could see. So he answered the door and invited me in. We walked back to his bedroom as I'm explaining to him that he couldn't own or possess firearms. And I walked just inside the door, and there's a pistol on the dresser pointing in my direction, just sitting up there. And due to the bore size, I can tell it's a BB or pellet gun. And so I'm not really concerned about it. But without telling me, he reaches around and pulls another pistol out from under a pillow on the bed and starts turning. And I see it between his arm and his body. And so in that fraction of a second, I have to make a decision if I'm going to draw my firearm and kill him and stop the threat. And so I chose not to, due to how he was holding the gun and his mannerisms while he was doing it. And as he finished turning around, he states it's just a BB gun. And so that was his story. But the headlines would change if I had shot that individual. And the reason being because he was black. And so then it would be a white officer kills a black man with a BB gun.
It's certainly a conversation that I think is happening in every community around the country. So thank you, Darren Spencer, for being here to talk about your book, Humane Policing.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Stay with us. We'll be right back.